p.m. 2016. Mr. Metric, could you call the roll, please?
Sure. Ms. Richmond? Mr. Weisford? Here. Mr. Wegwright? Here. Ms. Fortner? Here. Mr. Cilio? Here. Ms. Tebler-Moffett?
Here.
President Mudrick?
Present.
Solicitor Walker? Present. Mayor Grady?
It's on in the room.
I did see him in the room.
Momentarily, yes. Ms. Richmond, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, at this time I would like to offer an opportunity to Councilor Weisford, who is Chair of the Building and Zoning Committee, to make a brief statement.
Good evening. Am I close enough to the microphone?
Very well.
I'll speak loudly. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, council members, Mr. Metric, Solicitor, Mr. Walker, members of the community. Our council is privileged this evening to hold this hearing of the Narberth Planning Commission's recommendation for replacement of Chapter 124, the zoning section of the Borough Code. This revision of our Borough zoning code is important to us because it will help mitigate the impact of new construction that will impact the unique character of our neighborhoods. Anything built new under the form-based code will conform to some guidelines that will help protect and preserve the sense of place that attracted most of us to live here. This legislation is a product of the Montgomery County Planning Commission in partnership with our all-volunteer Planning Commission. And some are here this evening. I think most are here this evening. Is Jim Cornwell here?
He's supposed to come.
So we hope we hope wherever he is, he's healing well. Thanks, Dave. Here's a brief history of this document. The effort to review Chapter 124, the Narberth Zoning Code, began in 2006. The Building and Zoning Committee at that time, Nancy Watts, Matt Pettigrew, Heidi Boyce, asked the Narberth Planning Commission to meet twice each month and read through the Borough Zoning Code. This exercise took 4 months and resulted in a working group of Planning Commission members deeply concerned that the code, the existing code, could not adequately protect the existing built form of the town. This original group, 10 years ago, Jim Cornwell, Dave Brower, Eli Holtman, Lynn Rozanko, and myself worked for several years to find ways just to modify or amend the existing zoning code. But the more we dug down, it became clear that Band-Aid solutions did not address the root of the problems that we saw. Too many opportunities for oversized suburban additions that would crowd our streets and seemed out of place here. Councilwoman Heidi Boyce noted that Lansdowne, Pennsylvania incorporated form-based standards into their zoning, and the Narberth Borough Council, under the leadership of Mary Jo Daly, currently our state representative, agreed that zoning revision would be a priority for their council. So on October 14th, 2011, a statement of intent regarding form-based code was issued by the borough. It stated that after extensive preliminary study over a period of several years, the Narberth Planning Commission proposes that a replacement zoning code be developed under the supervision of the Planning Commission and the Building and Zoning Committee for review by the public and for subsequent adoption by Borough Council with the intent of providing for the following. So that was written October 14th, 2011. Here are the principles. Consistency with Narberth's Statement of Community Objectives, 2001 and 2006. Maintenance of the early 20th century character of the town is still virtually intact, which contributes to the desirability and stable property values of Narberth. Clarity of text, including explanatory illustrations, which can easily be understood by builders, developers, and code officials, as well as by homeowners and laypersons. Regulations of land uses in a rational fashion, consistent with current and reasonably foreseen patterns. Rationalization of the zoning map, elimination of any instances of previous spot zoning with the aim of promoting long-term consistency of property uses with their surroundings. Regulation of lot coverage in terms of building footprint and impervious coverage of the ground plane. Establishment of front yard building lines reflecting neighboring existing conditions with the aim of promoting consistency of front yard setbacks within precincts on a block-by-block or local basis. Regulation of the essential elements of building form, size, and scale with the aim of promoting consistency of public face of structures within precincts on a block-by-block or other local basis. The code will establish a set of objective standards for the above, freeing code officials from the burden of rendering subjective judgments. Requirement that the zoning applications include sufficient documentation to describe proposed development, including appearance from the public right-of-way, sufficient to demonstrate compliance with zoning code requirements. Five more principles. Regulation of parking in both residential and commercial areas in such a way as to promote safety, convenience, and business viability. The next one, regulation of signage in commercial and residential settings with mandatory limits on placement, size, height, illumination, safety, and other characteristics. Regulation of shade trees along public right-of-ways, including maintenance of mature trees for their health and for public safety, removal of dangerous trees, and replacement of significant canopy trees with appropriate species. Retention of the replacement code of many existing regulations that deserve to be carried forward. Regulation of other matters appropriate for inclusion in a comprehensive zoning code. So, during 2012, work began with professional planners from Montgomery County. The Borough co-sponsored public workshops with the Civic Association, and these engagements over many, many evenings guided the early framework for standards that has now been refined by the Borough Solicitor, our professional third-party planners, during hundreds of hours of public Narberth Planning Commission meetings chaired by Jim Cornwell. Council members, I know you will join the committee, all of our entire community in giving ongoing thanks to the many, many, many committed neighbors, many of whom are here tonight, who came to so many of these meetings over so many years, and especially since the workshops that were held in 2012. And obviously special appreciation is well deserved by members of the Narberth Planning Commission, Jim Cornwell, Dave Brower, Eli Holtman, Heidi Boyce, Todd Bressi, Miriam Schenko, and Jim Spear for their time and effort in getting us to this hearing this evening. And Mr. Council President, thank you for your leadership with this legislation and for your skillful facilitation of this multi-year community discussion that has brought us to the hearing this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Solicitor?
Yes. At this time, we're going to be adjourning this public meeting, and we're going to adjourn into the public hearing regarding Ordinance 995, the ordinance that would incorporate the form-based code and the new zoning map. I have a number of exhibits I'd like to mark for the record. Exhibit 1, or Board Exhibit 1, is the ordinance itself, which again incorporates the form-based code as proposed, Chapter 124, and the zoning map. Board Exhibit 2 is the proof of delivery of the notice and of tonight's hearing and the ordinance itself to the Mainline Times, dated March 29, 2016. Board Exhibit 3 is proof of publication of the notice of tonight's hearing and the ordinance itself in the Mainline Times for April 3rd and April 10th, 2016. Board Exhibit 4 is the letter of submission of the ordinance to the Borough Planning Commission dated March 28, 2016. Board Exhibit 5 is the letter of submission of the ordinance to the County Planning Commission in Montgomery County dated March 28, 2016. Board Exhibit 6 is a copy of the letter of submission to the Montgomery County Law Library and the attested ordinance provided to them. That's Board Exhibit 6. Board Exhibit 7 is the legal notice that was published for tonight's hearing. Board Exhibit 8 is the proof of posting throughout the borough of the comprehensive rezoning and the notice of tonight's hearing. And Mr. Metrick, you do attest and swear to the postings?
I do.
Board Exhibit 9 is the proof of delivery of tonight's hearing and of the ordinance itself as a courtesy given to neighboring Lower Merion. Board Exhibit 10 will be the incorporation of any and all letters that have been received by the borough office and to borough council related to the form-based code. At that time, that is all the board exhibits that I have, and I turn it over to council to solicit public comment and feedback on the ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Solicitor. I received a number of letters from the community, and at the conclusion of the live public comment, I will be saying the name and address of those whose letters were received, and whether those were in favor of the passage of the ordinance before us or opposed. If you are in the audience and you would like to make a specific comment or to have specific words heard here tonight versus just being entered on paper form into the public record, I would encourage you to take this opportunity. We will have a 3-minute time limit for each individual, and I will start here in the right front. This is your opportunity for public comment. If you'd like to speak, you can come up, state your name and address, and then we'll begin the clock. There was a sign-in sheet? Yes. Whoa, let me get that. Easy. While we're adjusting our camera here, so that you're aware, not only we have a court reporter who is taking a transcript of this meeting, we can also do the community video. And additionally, I would ask that you address all of your comments to council rather than the audience. Kathleen Hartman.
And as there is a court reporter, when you come up to the microphone, please clearly state and spell your last name so the court reporter can have that accurately done and provide your physical address.
I made an error. I came in first, and I thought it was just a sign-in for all of us attending.
Well, you get the door prize.
Well, I don't live in the borough, so I don't know if I could even. I'm a realtor in Duffy, and I just thought it would be a good learning experience to be here.
Well, thank you for coming. You can take that agenda with you. Mr. Jacobs, Ken Jacobs.
Good evening. My name is Ken Jacobs, Jacobs, and I live at 43 Narberth Park. My question is, assuming that this form-based zoning is passed tonight, how will that impact plans that have been submitted but not approved on projects that are proposed and not yet in the works?
Thank you. We're going to keep public comment one way this evening. There's a lot of us here. And we'll honor the spirit of it. And I think we'll take a note of any questions, and at the end of the evening, the ones we can get back to you about right away, we will. And others, if you want to leave an email address or something, we'll try and get back to you that way. Thank you. Greg Paninos?
I have no comment.
Thank you. Kadir Khan?
Kadir Cameron, 128 Woodside Avenue, CAN. One thing I don't know if you're aware of, but this form-based zoning code is a policy that is being pushed all across the country, all under the management of regional planning promoted by national and international policies. Sometimes it's referred to as smart growth, or sustainable development, or comprehensive planning, but they all have a similar plan agenda, perhaps tweaked here and there for local variations. Pretty much as a cookie-cutter design policy, it first appeared in Seattle, Washington, moved down the coast through California, across the West and Midwest, and is now hitting the East Coast. They all have nice sounding programs like green growth, open space, walkable communities, and other nice sounding terms. But one thing they all have in common is increased density along train corridors. This policy is very apparent in Lower Merion, where there is development plans for stack and pack apartments in Ballas of Kenwood, Wynwood, Ardmore, Haverford, Braemar. If you look at the footprint of the new form-based zoning code in Narberth, it is very much in keeping with this bigger plan, though on a smaller scale. The complaints I hear from communities that have adopted form-based zoning code is that the projection for economic and population growth were inaccurate, leaving the township holding the bag for recovery costs, raising taxes considerably. The other complaint I hear is that local regulations start to be dictated by outside entities like HUD, FEMA, conservation conservancies, taking the local control out of local hands. There are other things we should take under consideration for self-preservation and protection.
30 seconds or so.
Other than economic and population projections. And these are if there's another major economic crash, significant social upheavals, and if a large-scale war were to break out. Narberth is being surrounded by the urbanization of Lower Merion. The best way to protect liberty and freedom from any of these concerns is keeping Narberth independent. Form-based zoning code actually starts to erode Narberth autonomy. You don't have a consensus on form-based zoning code. There are just too many questions about it. I suggest you implement a moratorium until issues and concerns are resolved.
Thank you, sir. Ms. McDonough?
Rosemary McDonough, McDonough, 9 Elmwood Avenue. And this is a shortened version of my letter to Aaron. Dear Aaron, I'm writing about the form-based zoning code. My concern is less about green, red, and yellow, and more about Narberth's declining civility. While we debate enclosed porches, many of us have already enclosed our hearts and minds from one another. I ran into a neighbor the other day who's been active in zoning, and though he and I have different views, he said something that really stuck with me. He said he now feels uncomfortable saying hello to someone in town before he knows who the person is. I think the division he describes is real, and I think it marks a major change in Narberth. Though our lack of civility began, ironically enough, over a church, it's gotten worse with the form-based zoning code, I think because it's so complex. It troubles me that although we have smart, well-informed people on both sides of this issue, we can't even agree on the basics of what this code says. My gut is that neither side is 100% right or 100% wrong, but that's how we've been treating each other. So I'm writing to appeal to our better angels. I know much work has gone into this code, and I know many people are eager to pass it quickly. But I'm afraid that if Borough Council passes this code in its entirety, in particular allowing commercial use of the Baptist church after so much opposition, the council will do irreparable harm to our community. There needs to be consideration for all sides of this issue because otherwise too many of us will feel excluded. Instead of voting yes or no on the form-based code in toto, would you consider evaluating and voting on this code in digestible pieces that we can all understand? Can we move forward with the less controversial pieces while reconsidering those parts that are so hotly debated? In particular, can we have a fuller discussion about the pros and cons of increased density? Thank you for listening. I respect the hard work and integrity of all of you, and I hope we can work together to preserve not just Narberth's buildings, but more important, Narberth's spirit of community. Thank you.
Thank you. Wendy White? Ms. White? Thank you.
I have a very limited thing to say. It has to do with the street that I live.
Introduce yourself.
Wendy White, W-E-N-D-Y, W-H-I-T-E, 229 North Essex Avenue, Narberth, PA. That's it. I live on Essex Avenue, and it's my understanding that we were single-family homes pretty much on the east side, and that you could have up to, what, 2 or 3 families in a building, is that right? And I guess I'm concerned that now we're going up to 5, and that if there's enough frontage, you can have flat roof apartment buildings on the 200 block of Narberth Avenue, and that concerns me. I'm concerned about other things, but that's right on my street. So it just feels like we're just trying to cram more people in, because that means more cars, and that's a problem. So we love our house and where we live, but I'm concerned about that. It's very specific.
Thank you. M. Simpson? Simpson? Or Simpson? Catherine Kurtz. And I'm going to take the suggestion of Councilor Wainwright. Amy Tieske-Feldman, you were on deck. Just give it right now.
I'm Catherine Kurtz, K-U-R-T-Z, 531 Dudley Avenue. I want to urge you actually to pass the code tonight. I know it's not perfect. I know there are things that might happen, but right now we're in the midst of things that are happening. And unless we pass the code, I can see more and more and more small Narberth houses being bought up for $300,000, being developed into $850,000 houses right in front of our eyes, or 3-story garages constructed on anybody's backyard. So I think we need to take care of what's happening right now. I think that's urgent, and pay attention to what might happen. But that's another issue. I think we're in the middle of a crisis, a redevelopment crisis, and I urge you to pass the code.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Nixon.
I'm so confused. I'm Amy Tieske-Feldman, T-E-C-O-S-K-Y-F-E-L-D-M-A-N. I live at 208 Forest Avenue, and I also would urge you to pass the code tonight. I think there are lots of areas where individual people would have concerns. There are particular pet things that I wish were in or not in the code. I think that is less important than are taking this, which is basically very good, and doing it. And I am happy to continue talking with you about my particular interests and concerns after we have this in place. But I think we really are putting ourselves at risk by not taking this action. So thank you for your time, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Nixon, if you'd like to come up, and Ms. Bizak, you're next.
Good evening, members of council. It's nice to see you all. My remarks will be very brief. My name is Jim Nixon, I live at 219 Williams Avenue. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and my wife, Christina. We studied this code, even though a year ago I knew nothing about zoning. Now I feel fairly well informed. The pros of this code, while existent, or the cons of this code, while existent, are vastly outweighed by its pros. I understand the concerns of those who have issues with the code, but the reality is we have a serious and real development problem that's only going to get worse, and this code is a great toolbox to deal with that. So I would ask the council to pass the code. I would ask you to unanimously pass the code, and we can modify the code going forward to correct it when changes need to be made. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bizak, you're up. And on deck, Matt McKeever.
Kimberly Bizak, B-E-Z-A-K, 237 Dudley Avenue. We've seen many examples, particularly over the past year, that have demonstrated that our out-of-date code does not serve Narberth and leaves us vulnerable to exploitation by developers who come in and knock down our quintessentially Narberth homes and replace them with these out-of-scale McMansions that others have referenced. And now we have even more imminent threats on the horizon. I appreciate the clarity of the proposed code, and I believe that form-based zoning code provides a fairly right fit for the Narberth that we know and love. And as others have said, once we put it into place, we can really see how the nuts and bolts are working for us and tweak it as necessary. So with that said, I urge Borough Council to pass form-based code now in its current draft. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McKeever?
No comment. I also thought it was time.
Alexander Tick. And on deck would be Elizabeth Brate.
Okay, my name is Alexander Ting, T-Y-N-G, 117 Woodside. Okay, I'm going to read a letter that I already sent in, but the premise of the comprehensive rezoning of Narberth is that the existing code is out of date and does not accurately represent the look and function of Narberth today. And by the way, I'm not going to say for or against the code. I like many parts of it. So, in many ways, the form-based zoning code is an improvement. But I have deep concerns that there are aspects of the proposed code that also do not accurately reflect the characteristics of the neighborhoods. I would like to focus on the rezoning of the largest residential districts, red, orange, and yellow. The differences between the red district and the other largest residential districts have been exaggerated in the form-based zoning code. The red district will remain the same, allowing only single-family homes, while the orange and yellow districts will see a huge jump in density. The orange district, which now allows singles and twins, will allow up to 5 family homes, and the yellow district will allow all housing types up to multi-unit apartment buildings. If the new code has to allow for increased density and growth, then why is the red district allowed to remain the same? Why are the orange and yellow districts taking all the brunt of increased density? Distance from the train. The entire borough is only about, I think, a half square mile or 3/4 square mile. The SEPTA station is approximately 2,800 feet from the northernmost tip of the borough and 1,200 feet from the southernmost tip of the borough. In reality, the difference in distance is not significant because the entire borough is very small and easily walkable. Yet the relative distance from the train station was given at former meetings as a major reason for zoning density. Housing types. Reasons that have been given for the red zoning are bigger lots and more single-family homes, yet parts of South Narberth are equal in density. This is just an example.
and housing types, with very few non-conforming houses. The major difference is that South Narberth looks more town-like, less suburban, simply because it's older and the streets are laid out in a grid pattern. Defining districts. When borders are drawn between districts, one can claim that a certain district is red, orange, or yellow because it includes certain housing types. But whether a district includes apartment buildings or 5-family homes depends on where one draws the lines. It becomes a self-justifying process. Neighborhoods that grow over long periods of time usually contain more non-conforming buildings than neighborhoods that are built within a short period of time. When we assign the colors, we have to take into consideration that Narberth is an organically grown town, not an artificially created town. I suggest continuing the conversation about the residential districts before and after passing the form-based code, and I would like to make a few suggestions. I'll go really fast. Lower the density in the orange zone to 3-family houses. Allow twin houses in the red zone. Change borders of districts, i.e. make some of South Narberth red, make portions of West Narberth, not Narberth Park, orange. Change east sides of North Narberth Avenue and North Essex Avenue to orange. All these changes could reflect more accurately what is there and create a more consistent zoning plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Elizabeth Brady? No?
Well, I'm not Elizabeth Brady. I'm next in the list, Jose Diego. I'm Elizabeth Salzon. My name is Jose Diego, D-I-E-G-O. We live in 413 Country Lane. And even though I haven't studied neither code in detail, my understanding, also my wife's, is that the new code goes more in the spirit of what Narberth is. That's one of the reasons why we moved here. This place is unique. I've been to many places in the world. This is one of those places that makes you feel, even if I'm not from this area, it makes you feel like you're at home. And I'm concerned about all the development that is going, in particular, all the apartment buildings, all these blocks. They don't fit here. I would hate the character of this town to get lost if we don't take care of it. So because of this, even again, I don't know the details of both codes. My feeling is that the new base zone code is the way we want to go. So we're both in support of passing that code as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Miriam Shaka, and then follow Miriam Congress.
Miriam Shaka, 149 Marion Avenue, Narberth. And I speak on behalf of myself as a planning commission member, and also on behalf of my husband, Rob McGreevy, same address, who's home for the kids. So I just want to urge you to pass the form-based code tonight. I want to just speak for a few of the primary reasons why I think the code is really important to pass now. In agreement with many other speakers, I think that we need to pass it now to preserve the housing stock that is under threat. And also, the code by discouraging tear downs and discouraging the kind of building that is hostile to walking pedestrians is something that's really important for the feel of the town. And I also just want to assure everyone that this is not a cookie cutter code, that it was done specifically starting from Narberth as its template as it currently is, and really working organically from the current town that exists. And I just want to remind us that the current code we have is basically a photocopy of a code that came from Euclid, Ohio, and it was photocopied and just kind of adopted everywhere across the country in whatever it was, 1940 or so. So the code we have now does follow current principles in public planning, including in trying to use transportation corridors as a basis for deciding to some extent what kind of housing type should go where, but it also really has gone through a very, very rigorous process of review. So please pass the form-based code tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Bressi, and then Michelle Pananopoulos. There is a sign-in sheet if you would like to speak You don't have to sign in to be here, but if you would like to speak, I'm going to take page 2 here. I'm going to put it back over there. I saw some new faces walk in the room. I'm not going to go up and down the rows if I have a sign-in sheet. So if you would like to speak this evening on this issue, please sign your name, and I will call on you. Thank you. Mr. Bressi.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Todd Bressi, B-R-E-S-S-I, and I live at 300 North Essex Avenue. I'm also the Vice Chair of the Narberth Planning Commission. And I'm here to speak in support of the Form-Based Code, to urge you to pass it tonight, and to thank you, all of you, for all the work you've done with us over the last months and last years to get us to this point. All the council members, I'm not allowed to address the community, all the people behind me in the community, we appreciate that. We've heard a lot in the last few days about how the form-based code might encourage tear-downs, actually. And I think one thing that's important to say is that no zoning code, no law can prevent someone from tearing down a house. You just can't stop that. That's the way things work. But what the new form-based zoning code does is it tips the economic incentives towards the preservation of buildings rather than the tearing down and replacement of them by the way it controls the size of buildings and defines what you can do on certain size lots. While the philosophy of a form-based code might be a general thing that's occurring in the planning world, the details of this form-based code are based on very careful measurements of all the properties in Narberth, observations of parking patterns on every block in Narberth, and sometimes the rules change from block to block in this code simply to reflect the pattern of houses that are there. All this goes into the measurements and the details that make it less possible to tear down and build something out of scale, and more advantageous to keep your house and out of it. I mean, I think one of the things we were very concerned about was allowing homeowners to add to their houses so that they can remain in place. We've heard that the form-based zoning code will introduce new density into Narberth. For the most part, the form-based code is neutral on density. It allows pretty much the same density that the current zoning code does. In fact, it allows a lot less density than similar codes that are being passed in Lower Merion that's been observed. So it's not really a code that's designed to change what has already been the policy of the borough. We've heard that the code should be passed in parts. Well, in essence, if the code is voted on now, it will be passed in parts because we will be constantly looking at it, adjusting it, fixing it. A friend of mine the other day said she found out she couldn't build a porch on her house, the back of her house, because the form-based code wouldn't let her. I don't know why, but that's something we would look at. Maybe there's something that needs to be fixed. So the code will always be a work in progress. So for those reasons, I wish I could turn around and talk to my neighbors to help assuage them of the concerns I've heard, but I must address you, and I urge you to pass the code. I look forward to working with you on it in the coming years. And as I hear rumblings of interest in the historic preservation ordinance, I'm really looking forward to working with you on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Panagopoulos? And Katie Skeen is next.
I will be very brief. Thank you. I just want to thank everyone on council and all members of the planning commission.
Name and address.
Michelle Panagopoulos, 125 Marion Avenue.
Spell your last name for me.
P-A-N-I-N-O-P-O-U-L-O-S, 125 Marion Avenue.
Thank you.
Again, I just want to thank you for all the hard work. This has been a really long process. I wasn't involved in the earlier planning meetings, but I have subsequently in the last year or so sort of looked through all the documents and all the PowerPoints and all the surveys and have seen how much work went into this to draft a code that was very specific to Narberth's needs, and I think you've done a great job. There are things in the code I don't like. There are things in the form-based code. I'm sure everybody here has something or some things, items that they don't like, they'd like to see changed. But on balance, I know the old code pretty well. It needs to be replaced. And I think the form-based code gives us immediate protection, as has been mentioned by lots of other folks, against overdevelopment and thoughtless redevelopment. So let's urge you to just pass it tonight. If there are things we need to work on, let's just keep working on and moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Skeen, and then Michael Brannigan.
Hi, I'm Katie Skeen, S-K-E-E-N. I live at 227 Hampton Avenue. Michael Brannigan is actually my husband, and he gave me permission to speak for him also. So he's here, you can ask him. But you can count us as two opinions pro the form-based code and in favor of passing it as soon as possible as is. I've participated in a lot of meetings and written letters, so I'm not going to speak at length. I guess my one concern is, and I think it's gotten a little bit lost in the mix, is what's happening with the church buildings on Elmwood Avenue. And I would hope that whatever form the code is in, or whatever new ordinances might be coming up, we can restore that possibility of a conditional mixed use in those buildings and also in the other civic and institutional buildings, because I would really like to see those buildings not torn down, because that's a real possibility if a viable mixed-use plan is not possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Joanne Wallen. And this is your last chance if you'd like to sign the sign-up sheet, if you have something to say.
Thank you. I'm Joanne Walden, Joanne Wallen, 321 Marion Avenue. I just find myself confused because there seems to be a disagreement about whether this code would encourage higher density development or it wouldn't. And I'd be interested at the end of this, if there's time, in somebody sort of clarifying that. I would like to discourage more density. One of the delights is that we are very small, both in footprint and in number. We can know a lot of us, and the more of us there are, kind of the smaller percentage of our community we can know and interact with. And then I'm also concerned about parking and traffic with higher density. Thanks.
Thank you. David Schoenhardt, and then Ken Kurtz.
Hi, David Schoenhardt, 131 Marion Avenue. Schoenhard. Alarmingly, we've seen a rezoning effort gone haywire, which once started with the best of intentions, cohesiveness, and goals, has grown into a jungle of tangled proposals, intrigue, and frayed tempers. Where do we differ? On density and on approach. We never signed on to intentional increased density. We never intended the entire borough to be comprehensively rezoned, where streets like the lovely bungalows on North Essex are destined to be flat-roofed apartment buildings, or our Iona row houses can be multi-story mixed use, or our two-family residences can become 5 if the property is large enough, or our quaint business district, which is growing yearly with restaurants and pubs, is slated to become 3 or 4-story developer dreams of higher-end and national chains. But the form-based zoning code, it will be there to save us. No, it won't. It is a failed effort that should never have been started. It is a blunt instrument to protect only a few historic properties, but only if they convert to a commercial density. It uses subjective language that lawyers will twine around, dragging this borough into endless legal suits. It tries to define appropriate architectural style when historic properties of our vintage need true historic guidance and not generic platitudes. We encourage you to go back, clean up the zoning code, adjust the setbacks, institute property combining and tear down moratoriums, allow property owners to historically list their own properties in order to save them by deed restriction, adjust the garage doors to not face forwards, and institute an ethics code for the Planning Commission, and expand their mission to include historic review. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kravitsky, and then Deborah Longstreet.
Ken Kravitsky, 1 Riverside Avenue.
Can you spell your last name for the court report?
Yes. K-R-I, V as in Victor I, T-Z-K-Y. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm going to try to be brief since it's a school night and my kids are in the hall. But I do want to thank those that have spoken up on both sides, and in particular, I recognize Rosemary McDonald's comments earlier about the importance of civility and what's been happening with it in our community, as well as Alexander Ting, who I think has been asking some great questions throughout this process. Tonight is a long time in coming. Like many in this room, I don't believe that the form-based zoning code is perfect. There are items I haven't entirely made up my mind on, such as the 45-foot height on Haverford Avenue. There are items that I would like to improve on, from the minute, such as the difference between a child care center and a school, to the major, the square footage per person for professional office space. But also, like many in this room, I've seen the challenges and dangers to our town in our current code. It is very easy to kick the can down the road and to let others deal with the problems in the future. We've seen examples of that in the past where people waited for the perfect proposal or solution. That perfect proposal doesn't exist. Please do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, or in this case, if I can even say very good. I want to encourage all of you to do the job that you were elected for, to continue to keep Narberth vital and even to make our town a better place. To me, there is no doubt that this means passing the form-based zoning code tonight, and then to continue to take a serious look at evaluating the code and updating it as necessary. Many of us will be very happy to continue working with you on this. Thank you for your time and energy during this process.
Thank you. Ms. Lonsdorf, and then Vicki Benedict Farber.
Deborah Lonsdorf, 128 Chestnut Avenue. I don't have a specific question. There are...
Deborah, could you spell your last name for the court reporter? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Oh.
Could you spell?
Lonsdorf.
Thank you.
There are a number of questions submitted by Terry Fox, and those are my questions too. So I would like to know if they're going to be answered. If not, I'll ask them now.
We do not have plans to answer questions this evening.
You don't have plans to answer questions? Okay. When can we get our questions answered? Because we have been asking them on the blog for a very long time, and that blog has gone dormant. And that's, okay, well, I'll just make a statement.
Go ahead.
The blog has gone dormant. We were told we would have the questions answered, but they haven't been answered. So there's a perception that, council has not been happy with all the questions that we have. And there's kind of an adversarial relationship that has developed. And I think it's kind of an easy thing to have the questions addressed so that people feel more at ease. I am one who feels that there should be another outside review. The Montgomery County Planning Commission, I guess, reviews this, and you had touted that it was an inexpensive option. Sometimes you get what you pay for. I'm very concerned about what David Schoenhardt has brought up, and I'm concerned about density. We are one of the densest communities in the entire state of Pennsylvania. We're a half a square mile. There's not a lot of space here. So more density is going to bring, stormwater runoff. It's going to bring more people. It's going to bring more cars, and it's going to bring more stress on the school system. So I would like to understand why there is more density built in when we're already below the density of where we are. I'm just very concerned about those issues. And, I want to see a new code. Personally, I want to see a new code. I want to see the design guidelines put in. But I'm kind of scared about what this is for. I've heard so much that that the due diligence hasn't been done. It's a very confusing document. So I just wish that we weren't under the gun, and I wish that we didn't have a situation where we have a person who owns a property in this community, the Elmwood Avenue Church, who seems to be holding a hammer over the head of this community. Everybody's scared about the church being torn down. They're scared about tear downs. I think the properties that have been torn down and rebuilt, I don't have a huge problem with them. I don't think they're so bad, really. I would not like to see the oldest building in Narberth torn down, but if it is, then it is. I feel like you're pushing this through for the interest of the developer. And I think that's a big problem. You have to listen to the people in the community.
Thank you. Vicki Benedict Farber, and then John Shaw.
My name is Vicki, B-I-C-K-Y, Benedict Farber, F-A-R-B-E-R.
I live at 515 Conway Avenue. I've been a resident here for 31 years. And besides the floodplain issue, I wanted to ask the council about, does the borough have any plans to adopt and enforce property maintenance provisions of the building codes for apartment complexes and other buildings, commercial buildings, where residential areas and residential houses are adjacent? That's what my concern is that these apartment buildings or other commercial buildings are not held to the same standards. And I wanted to know if the borough has any provisions to adopt that code.
As I mentioned, we're not going to be answering questions this evening, but I would be happy to speak to you after the meeting and give you some more details.
Thank you.
Thanks. Robert Bates will be next.
My name is Don Schaffner. I apologize, I have no voice, so I can either talk or breathe, so you have to bear with me. It's SHOFFNER, I live at 216 North Essex, so I'm in an impacted, possibly, area. And Mr. Weisword, in your opening remarks, you talked about the character of our neighborhoods and what attracted us here. And I really don't think it was flat roofs and 5 family dwellings. I think it was the unique character of individual homes, family homes, front lawns, kids playing, and not commercial development for developers' sakes. I would urge you to move ahead with the code change, but not tonight. There's things that need exploration. There's things I think you need more dialogue with the residents of Narberth. You also talked about the 20th century character. Again, 5 family homes might have been a 20th century character in a tenement area, but not in a suburban setting or a rural setting like Narberth at that time. So I would ask you to re-examine what attracted you to Narberth, all of you. Was it more density? Sprucing up the place? Or did you think it was charming and that's why you came here? I'm running out of voice, but I really want to second what Alex Ting said and give her my support for all the comments that she enumerated. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bates. And then Jim Spear.
Roderick Bates, R-O-D-E-R-I-C-K, and Bates, B-A-T-E-S, 411 Country Lane. I'm coming to this from a slightly different perspective, actually, originally from the West Coast, 5th generation, a town called Carmel. Some of you might have known it. I would call it a cautionary tale. It is not the town I grew up in, it's not the town my parents grew up in, nor is the town that my great-grandfather grew up in. So, be cognizant of what you have here. This is the town that I want my great-grandson to grow up in. So, what you're doing now is going to have that type of long-term impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Spear.
Hi, Jim Spear, S-P-E-E-R, 321 Grilling Ave. I want to urge adoption of the code tonight. I've been privileged to serve on Planning Commission that developed this. I've been involved in many details of this, and I'm convinced it's the best thing to keep our town the way it is, as we like it, in the scale that we like it. It's going to, there's many provisions to keep the historic buildings in place, the civic institutional buildings to inhabit a new use, and to ensure that any redevelopment, when it does occur, is in the proper scale. Thanks.
Thank you. Dennis Montaigne.
Dennis Montaigne, KENTAGNA 306 Grayling Avenue. I just want to add my voice to many others tonight in support of passage of the code tonight. In my 25 years in Narberth, I've spent a lot of time thinking about Narberth, about the way it looks, about the way it's changed and developed over time. It's not a town that is preserved in amber. It's never been a town that has been preserved in amber. What's encouraging me and exciting me about the new code is that for once, for the first time since the 1940s, we're going to have a code that actually is going to help us to guide and to guide what happens here and to have a greater influence over the nature of what happens here. So I would urge passage of it. I feel particularly privileged to be working with a group of people to try to get passage of it that's worked extremely hard. And this is a process going on for many years. Much public involvement. I run public involvement for projects with the National Park Service, and I've never seen public involvement as extensive as the public involvement was for this particular project. So let's move on ahead. As many people have said, there are things that need to be changed and tweaked. That can be done as we're moving through it. We're going to realize what those things are over time. But I would just say let's go and let's move ahead.
Thank you. That concludes the speaking public comment for this evening. If you'll indulge me a moment, I would just like to read the names of those who have sent me emails, either for or against, with questions. Warren Schloss, SCHLOSS, 10 Narberth Park, says that he and his wife fully support passing the code. Frank and Donna Brandisio, BRANDOLISIO, they have concerns about passing the code. I received a letter from Alexander Tin, Katie Skeen spoke. David Bordeaux, BERDOW, has many concerns about passing the code and a number of questions. Terry Fox did send a letter to council with a number of questions and is very concerned about passing the code along with, it says here, her husband David. Mary Pat Perry, PERRI, is asking for an independent review and is very concerned about the passage of the code. Patsy Higgins, HIGGINS, would urge us to adopt it as soon as possible. Robin Barinholtz, BERENHOLZ, is very concerned about increased density and would like us to spend more time before considering passage. Sally Cooter, KUDER, would like it to be passed. Kimberly Neff, no, sorry. Jesse Lytle, is that how it's pronounced? LYTLE, 108 South Narberth Avenue. She would like it to be passed. Michelle Kondo, KONDO, 115 Marion Avenue, would like it to be passed. Karen Kessler, KESSLER, ready to support the form-based code. Tracy Ellenbogen, ELLENBOGEN, she's a renter here in Narberth, and she would like to pass the code. I received a letter from Rosemary McDonough, Amy Tikoski-Feldman, and those are the letters I received. They will be entered into the record. We can close public comment and now move on to the next section of the meeting. I'm sorry, there are two written letters I have here. One from Bob Redinger Jr., 302 North Narberth Avenue. He would not like the code to be passed in its current form. And a letter from Victoria Dunho, who would like it to be passed to preserve the character of Narberth. Thank you for that reminder. We'll now move to council comment or action. At this point, would it be...
So as a formality, at this time, we're going to adjourn the public meeting, adjourn back into, sorry, just the public hearing and back into the public meeting. At this time, the ordinance is in a position for council to discuss and if council so desires to vote.
Does someone need to make a motion to put the ordinance on the table for discussion, or is it...
At that time.
Okay, well, why don't we, Councilor Westbourne, would you like to make a motion?
To adjourn?
No, No, to put this ordinance on the table so we can have a second and then council members can discuss in public.
Sure, Robert. Council members, Mr. Vice President, I move that we... Mr. Council President, council members, I move that we adopt the revision of Chapter 124 of the Narberth Borough Zoning Code.
That will be ordinance number 995.
Number 995.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilor Whitworth seconds. All right, we can have a discussion. I think I would move from left. Excuse me. I'll move from left to right. And give each council member an opportunity in this session to discuss their thoughts on this ordinance if they so choose, and see where it goes from there. And the microphone to Councilor Porter.
Yeah. Okay, I've not used this microphone before, so how does that sound?
Sounds better than this one.
Speak up? Okay, wasn't sure. I don't want to yell. Wave at me if I get too quiet, please. I want to thank everybody who came tonight, the people who spoke, the people who were here, the people who come to all the meetings, because I know I'm new to this table, but I've been coming to the meetings about the zoning code, a large number of council meetings since the beginning of 2015. And so I've seen a lot of rooms this full, and it's wonderful. I'm really glad to be a part of this community. So I feel like even though I wasn't around when this code was first talked about and developed, I feel that I do know a decent amount about it, from coming to meetings, from reading through a good bit of the code, and having seen what has happened over the last year in Narberth, where we've had some developers come in and replace houses that fit the character of Narberth with suburban-style tract homes that just don't fit our character. I feel that we need to move ahead with this code as it is now, knowing that it's a living document. It's going to change. No zoning code is ever fixed and set in stone. I mean, fixed, I don't mean corrected, I mean set in stone. And so I feel it's important for us to move ahead because I think this is the best choice for Narberth right now. Having said that, I would like to urge that as members of council that regardless of what we do tonight, we make a plan to review and respond to all the issues and questions that have been raised. They've been wonderful questions and wonderful issues, and I really want to make sure we respond to every single one of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Cillian.
So, to Bob Weisbord's point, this is a process that's been a very long time in the making, and I want to thank everybody, not just who's commented or come to meetings recently, but really over the entire 10 years that the process has been going on, and 5 years that what started as a form-based code have been under consideration. And it's interesting, as new faces have come into the dialogue, to see that there's always, on a big issue like zoning, a pretty wide range of opinions and places that people come from, even on the same block when thinking about the community. And what's been very interesting for me to observe from the public meetings on the code back in 2012 up to now is there's consistency to some degree in a lot of those comments and questions and push and pull on a lot of issues, everything from density to setbacks to architectural details and the like. And having spent more time than I care to think about with the current draft of the code, the deeper you dig into it, the more you see the amount of thoughtful compromise that was baked into what the final draft has turned out to be, based on that very thoughtful push and pull from a wide range of viewpoints in the community. You know, if I went out to design a code by myself with no input from anybody, it would sure look a lot different than what's here on the table. I'm sure that's the case for most of the people in the room too. And what you see is really a result of a great deal of thoughtful compromise that came together over a number of years and really reflecting a lot of the range of comments that even you've heard tonight still. The result, in my opinion, is two things. I won't rehash things I've said before, other than what we've wound up with is what I would consider a very conservative document in terms of it is a document that much better reflects the current built environment of this community than does the fairly cookie-cutter mid-century Euclidean code that we have today. And it's visible to you as you walk around town, walk along Montgomery Avenue, walk through certain parts of the downtown overlay district, and you can see the particularly commercial development that was built after our current code was adopted. And you can see the difference in streetscape from what you would think of as the fabric of Narberth to things that have been built. And I think this code does a great deal, not just in those obvious commercial districts, but everywhere to really repair that. And it is, in a lot of ways, a very preservationist code in that regard. The density that can result here is very similar to what's in the Euclidean code, but it's controlled and applies density to the existing density patterns of town, the existing lot layouts. It's actually, I would consider very much almost a preservationist code in some ways. And I'll say when I get a little further down here, where I think we can look forward. I know there's a lot of concern about preservation of historical structures, and I do have some concerns that I think we'll want to revisit regarding that. Most importantly, though, I think this code creates a very important new set point for us to start from as we face additional issues of development, growth, investment in the community, changes in transport, changes in living patterns going forward. It's a set point that much more accurately reflects the way we actually live and the way we build our town. And I do think it's very important that we pass it to create that new set point. It will remain, as all of the ordinances of the town do, a work in progress as we go forward. I do want to point out that we will have issues to follow up on here. There are some that I think we will tackle and should tackle in the short term, either because they're very simple or because there's been a lot of discussion of them and they're fairly small or chunky and easy to tackle. One is we've seen a lot of comments about a relatively minor aesthetic issue in the code around enclosed porches, and I think that's an issue that can readily be kicked back to the Planning Commission for further review, comment, and public comment, and it's a pretty identifiable small thing where I think there's a good public opinion on that. Second, parking study. We already have circulated an RFP and received a response so far to undertake a borough-wide parking usage policy, supply and demand study. What I would say, though, is parking there's a short-term issue and a long-term issue. There are short-term zoning-related and just tactical things that we need to do regarding parking, and that's one of the things that the study will be focused on. The second, though, I think it's a much longer-term thing, because I know that where I am on this issue is not where most folks are yet, though keep your eye on it over the next 10, 15, 20 years. While the code is quite preservationist overall, it still retains minimum parking requirements for off-street parking when you do new construction or changes of use. I find this concerning because much of our town was built before any such requirements existed. And so even though the minimum parking requirements are blended and mixed use and lower than in our very car-oriented mid-century development code that exists today, which is wholly inappropriate for the way the town lives, it is still more of a requirement than existed when the town was built. And so I am concerned that will have some residual effects as the town gets developed in making it look more suburban and less dense than it is today with more off-street parking. And over time, I would like to see us consider, and not right away, but in the longer term, eliminating those minimum parking requirements and rather managing all parking demand in town through some combination of permits, pricing parking and then centrally provision district parking to better enable adaptive reuse of the existing buildings in town. And then last, again, a longer-term issue, because in talking with neighbors, I do see a little bit of a generational issue here, maybe a lot of a generational issue here around mixed use. I think the code that we have today is one that a lot of people, particularly people who've lived in not in the city for a long time, are sort of familiar with codes that separate residential and commercial uses and institutional uses. In the much longer term, I think as the pattern of work evolves, and I see a lot more people of my generation and younger who are working remotely a lot, working from home a lot, two-parent working families that are balancing work and life and living, working, and playing in the same place. I think as the community over time evolves more to that model, and as our generation and younger is less driving-centric, which you're already seeing since the recession, I think over time we'll want to take a harder look at expansion of mixed use out of just the downtown overlay district and the Montgomery Avenue district to other places in the borough to support people who want to have businesses in homes, have potential for mixed work and life, and more of their life occurring naturally in their own neighborhood. Again, that's something that I don't think the community is ready for today, but over time may evolve in that direction. It's something that you would see in what you consider a purely form-based code that is really just looking at the form of the community and the form of the buildings and is very independent as to the use that goes in them. That is not this code. This code is much more of a hybrid code that governs that kind of space, but also pretty strictly restricts usage block by block. And over time, I think that's something that we will want to revisit. Again, probably not in the near term, but as the community evolves in the longer term. Last, though, I do want to thank the Planning Commission for years of very detailed work and thoughtful compromise on this issue, and thank the community tonight and over the past couple of years for a lot of very thoughtful comment, very insightful questions. We are a very rich community in the depth of interest, the passion, and the intelligence of our citizens. We should all be grateful for that. Work is not done, so we will continue to seek public input and help from the Planning Commission, the Office, and the Borough Engineer to continue to improve the code if it is passed, and to note issues in implementation and make sure those are addressed. And I hope the passage of the code will free up the Planning Commission. This has been their primary responsibility for a number of years, and allow them to focus on some other matters that are important to us, a borough-wide master plan, which could be in the works, and then some detailed follow-up on some other plans that have bubbled up for some of our more recent committee members. 2006 open space plan, a bike Narberth plan, a walk Narberth plan, all of which are on the shelf and all of which could use some further work. And also some planning for the long term around Parks and Rec, which we on the property committee would like to go the way of the Rec Board with the support of the Planning Commission. So I think we've come to a really good spot on this as a new set point for the community. I encourage the rest of council to pass it, and I really thank everyone for their engagement and hope it continues.
Thank you. Councilor Templeton-Moffett.
Thank you. Before we started, Charlie's a tough act to follow. I yielded my time to Charlie earlier as a joke, but I second everything that Barbara and Charlie have said. I would like to thank the Planning Commission and Montgomery County Planning Commission and everybody who sent a question, whether you're pro or con. Stay in the game, stay in the game. There is a lot we are going to have to do. It's a living document. It will be changed. It will be changed. And I know for some of you that's difficult to believe or process, because in the past that wasn't always true. But I promise you, as I'm here, sitting with the majority of these council members, ordinances will be reviewed, this document will be reviewed, processes will be reviewed, policies will be reviewed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Whitburn.
thank you, everybody, for your participation and obviously coming out on this. It's really a difficult process where you get to speak at us, and we speak at you, and there's not an interaction. It's practical, but it's not healthy. We're a community. We come back and forth by email, by phone, downtown, on these issues and the questions. One of the things I noted to some of the people that I've spoken to over the last few weeks is, we've got differences of values and we've got differences of facts or what is actually going on in this code. And I think we have to be careful to separate that because the only person that really understands this code in my perception is John. There's a lot of different, well actually the Planning Commission seems to understand it quite well too, but there's a lot of things that come at me that I can't answer still about this code, and I've spent a lot of time in it. So I'm going to ask it after I get through some of my comments, some of the questions that are still out there that either have been answered, that people feel haven't been answered. So let's keep that in mind, that we do need, as a council and as staff, and to make sure that we answer every question. We don't have to agree with it. You might not hear an answer you like, but we do have to answer it or point you to where that answer is, I think. That's my feeling about our responsibility at this table. One of the other things that comes up when we look at, is this a perfect code? Can we do better? Are there things? You have to look at the existing code. And if we had the existing code brought up here tonight, not only would there be a much louder disdain for it, but I would not be voting for the existing code. For the new code, I will probably, unless I hear something different in the next few minutes, be voting for it. But a lot of that's because it is such a better alternative. But there's a lot of good things about it. There's a lot of things that you hate to pass something that is not as good of a document as we could complete. It's not that far. It's 98, 90% in great shape. Some of the things I don't agree with, but there are still some missing elements in this document that hopefully will be flushed out over the next 2, 5, 6 months, whatever it is. Density has come up, and I have to agree with most of the people here that this is not going to add that much density, and the opportunities where density may be added, I think it's going to trickle in a very minor way that you won't notice a heck of a lot of it. So I'm not as concerned about density as some of the people who have been opponents of this code and feeling that we're going to change. There's a lot of other density going on around us, as everybody's pointed out. Some very large apartment complexes, condo complexes coming up, and unfortunately we don't have that right because it's Lower Merion Township to object to that. So it is affecting us on Wynwood Avenue, but the density we're talking about coming out of this code is fairly nominal at this point. The building height has come up in the downtown, going from 35 to 45 feet. It's still 3 stories, but one of the interesting things, as Charlie pointed out, is all the compromises and adjustments. When the conversation about the downtown first came up in this process, the initial reaction by some of the members of the Planning Commission was, maybe we should do a 5-story downtown area. And that's been brought down for a lot of different reasons. The one question I still have, which I'll ask later, is about the sunlight factor with the 45 feet. But as you look downtown, there's plenty of 3-story buildings down there. So I'm not worried about that happening. I do question the sunlight thing, but I don't have an answer if it's going to really affect it or not. But it's a very good question that I don't know if it's been answered or scientifically looked at in any way. I am concerned about, the one thing Dave Schoenhardt has struck a chord with me is the concept of property combining. I don't know where we stand on that within the code. That's a concern he has, and it would be something that I think we need to look further at if we can minimize that happening and what the code actually allows or doesn't allow there. One of the notes that I'm concerned about is I have a feeling this council tonight will all vote yes to pass this code. I hate the idea of referring to it as a unanimous vote because, as so many people have said around the table, there are still problems. Yes, is it better than what we have? Absolutely. Is it a unanimous voice that everything in it should go forward as is? I can't accept that. So those who will choose later on to refer to this as a unanimous vote of council, if it is that way, I ask you to hesitate, and I want it in the record that, that I differ with that concept if it occurs. But I think that sitting at this table, we all agree that this is overall a good thing, and some people, and many of us, believe it's an excellent thing to move forward on. So I thank the Planning Commission for roughing through this, staying with us, adding so much detail over the last 5-7 years of this process. The last little element I want to talk about before I get into my questions was the outside review and due diligence process. That's come up. Should we have a third-party review? There have been several professional planners involved in this over the last 5 years, be it multiple members of the County Planning Commission, members of our Planning Commission that are planners, Sean in his role as a planner first, John Walco's firm doing a review of the legal aspects. So there's been a lot of review of this code. Yes, we could go and get another party to do that. I don't think it's necessary at this point. I think we've had multiple voices on this. And even Mr. Schoenhardt, who has a lot of expertise, he's given us a lot of feedback, and most of his questions, I believe, have been looked at and hopefully responded to, but certainly looked at, because I don't think anybody wants him telling us, I told you so, in 5 years or 2 years. So there has been a lot of review. And then I'm just going to ask Sean a couple of the questions that Ms. Fox had asked me that I couldn't answer, that I felt, if there is an answer, if it's simple, great. If there's an answer that can be found, great. And, I'm trying to avoid the opinion aspect, but more just the questions. And so I'll go to the first one, the height, the building height. Do we have anything to tell us that will affect the sunlight if buildings were at 45 feet versus 35 feet on the town in the center?
A taller building casts more shade, yes.
Was there a reason why family child care homes are allowed in 3A if they're allowed in 3B, C, 4A, and 4B? Why aren't they allowed in 3A? So is there a specific reason for that? Or if you don't know, it's fine.
I think that was all part of the discussions about when we were talking about the gradient of the zoning districts and what uses and dimensions of those uses would be allowed in which districts. So that was in that context that decision was made.
Okay. And this is, she asked about the rationale for not allowing multifamily houses in 3A, but they're allowed in other districts except 5B. Though I've heard Mr. Cornwell enunciate that well and others, but if you want to...
There are no multifamily homes today in the 3A district.
So that question unanswered, but not a question anymore. Or maybe not. Maybe that was the answer. So that we changed it. And I think, just check real quickly. Oh, is there a list somewhere of the revisions that were made to the form-based zoning code after the April 6th caucus meeting? That was a concern I had. Was that posted anywhere for the public?
There were no substantive changes to the code after the April 6th caucus meeting.
Okay.
So there were spelling and typo corrections made by the county, but they were non-substantive.
Okay. And I think I'm going to leave it at that. I think most of these questions have been answered. And if they have not been answered in the time sequence that people preferred, I'm sorry to hear that. Please come to your council members if you're not hearing answers, and we will push further to get those answers for you. So thank you again.
Thank you, Councilor Westwood.
I have very little to add to the conversation that we've already had here tonight, council members. Just appreciate, already express my thanks to almost everybody. I want to add the people who spoke this evening. both in favor and against passage, as well as those who just came with questions. Thank you for your comments. I don't know anyone on earth who's not concerned about unintended consequences. Do you? It's often a reason that we don't do things, because we're concerned about the unintended consequence of making this decision to change something. But unintended consequences also come when we don't act. And I think it's, sitting in this seat has been a lesson in how to manage that kind of conundrum. So I would invite all of you, if you have any interest in volunteering, run for election, volunteer to become on Borough Council at some point in your life. It's a great education, and it's a great opportunity that we have in this fiercely autonomous Borough of Narberth. And I know some of you have been on council in the past, and some have been on the council for more than a decade. But it's a very special community that we have that can dialogue with each other and actually know one another. I think Rosemary McDonald pointed to that. So I'm not concerned that this document in any way impinges on Narberth's autonomy. I think every council member here is pretty committed to our independence as a borough, our independence and our opportunity to independently manage our own borough. I do see that in the coming year, there will be a queue of code amendment possibilities if we pass this ordinance tonight. And just as Mary Jo Daly and Nancy Lotz instructed the Planning Commission and the Borough Council to read through the zoning ordinance in 2006, I think it behooves us to sort of, with fresh eyes, read through this code, if we adopt it, with fresh eyes, and look to see what needs to be amended now, to make a list of those items, ask the Planning Commission to review those and make recommendations. Charlie spoke and Bob spoke to specifics. Also, in the coming year, the council will be initiating a discussion about historic review practices in partnership with a Commonwealth agency called the Pennsylvania Historic Museum Commission that provides this kind of facilitation services to municipalities on how to manage the inventory of historic properties. And the Lower Merion Conservancy has also offered their services to the borough. We have an ongoing contract with the Montgomery County Planning Commission, whose professional planners will continue to work with the borough and help us continue to both observe issues as they arise that may be important to address. I personally believe Todd Bressie as the chair of the Planning Commission, the vice chair of the Planning Commission. I actually believe him that he has the credibility to say with some authority that the density of the form-based code versus the density of the existing code is neutral. I believe him because not only do I kind of know him to be a person of great integrity, but he also has the professional training and credentials to make that assessment. So I tend to believe him, just as, you might, as a kind of a fact. So, that's up to you whether you want to believe that's true or not. I'm hesitating because I'm deciding if I should say something about the Elmwood Avenue Church, and then I'll be finished. I personally had a kind of a blind spot when we first began, after the new owner of the Elmwood Avenue Church approached the Borough Council and members of the Planning Commission. And because the owner of the church really only had one idea, which was to develop it into a kind of his own office and half residential. Those ideas were in line with what the Planning Commission had been discussing for many years, along the lines of how to put regulations around the adaptive reuse of our civic institutional buildings. So I didn't see that there was going to be an issue in the community, or that would be a controversial item. It kind of like came out of my peripheral vision and hit me on the head that people would perceive it as a problem. In my mind, here was a person who was willing to take a building that was abandoned and derelict for 10 years and repair it for us, so that all of us who see that historic property every day could have a restored church, beautifully restored historic property in our community. And I observed that this particular guy, who I don't know, I think I've had 6 conversations with him perhaps over the time that he's been the owner of that church. He didn't do what most developers do in most municipalities. They come with a development scheme and say to the community, if you don't let me do what I want to do with this property, I'm going to tear it down. That's what developers do. Anyone who's lived anywhere where people develop, want to leverage their power over a community to get what they want. That's what they do. They threaten the community. I did not see this guy doing that. He was really making, I think, just as members of council and the community were sort of making, and the Planning Commission were sort of making a good faith effort to try to save a building that had been vacant for 10 years. So I apologize to all of you that it wasn't more evident to us early that there was going to be an issue. At this point, I don't know, even despite the fact that there's more than 500 signatures on the what is it, the change.org petition. I don't know that that's going to be enough at this point, everybody. It does not appear to me, and I hope I'm wrong, that even passage of the form-based code, which will allow provisions to save that church, are going to make the difference at this point. The guy can make a lot of money tearing down the church and building houses. So I hope I'm wrong about that, but I'm very sad that we missed the opportunity. And I accept my part of that, and I hope you will accept yours in the outcome. So I have nothing more to add.
Thank you, Councilor Richmond.
Can everyone hear me? Yeah. All right. Actually, I'm not even sure where to start. The code is not perfect. No code's perfect. There's no such thing. There is a lot of good in the form-based code. I sat through a number of planning commission meetings back in the day before I was interested in being on council, and also when I was on the Civic Association. I know that a lot went into all of the minutiae and all of the details. I know they were hashed out. I know it took hours. I remember sitting in on the porch meetings and the pitch roof meetings. A lot of other things. I appreciate what the Planning Commission has done. I appreciate all of you being here through many of these big meetings. I really hope that everyone stays engaged. I know when there's a big issue, people come out, but we don't have a comprehensive plan in Narberth. A lot of what went on in this process was thinking about what Narberth is, what it represents, what it has become over time. a lot of people who are younger and new may have a different idea about what they want Narberth to be and what the needs of their family and the generation they see, what their needs are going to be. I don't know that there's an answer other than we have to work together. You know, whatever it ends up being, it's going to be because we participate somehow. And so I will say that I really truly hope that when we disagree, that we disagree with respect, and that we understand that people's points of view deserve that respect. And we shouldn't be bitter, we shouldn't be angry, we shouldn't be harsh, we shouldn't be tearing people apart for having a different opinion. We should value those opinions and try to make note of them somehow. And I hope that all the questions that were put in through the blog that were raised do get answered. I think that the respect has to come all the way around. Citizens to the borough council, to the office. We need to answer each other's questions. A lot of times, we don't know the answer. You know, a lot of times, a lot of people are simply saying, you know, you put me at ease, answer my questions about a couple of things, let me understand how this might work for my house, my neighborhood, my street. So it's always helpful just to provide more information and timely in a way so people don't think there's something nefarious going on. I really am concerned that the development that's going on, people, obviously a lot of us are concerned. I don't know that what, you know, John, you have to say about the combining of lots. And, you know, but I think that one of the primary goals of the code is to prevent big houses. And so if you're going to do that, and you're going to try to maintain the character and the size of the houses we have now, you know, that obviously if you have a big house, you have less density. So I don't believe this code will increase density very much. While I think it does, in fact, keep it in certain areas, and I don't know that that's fair, but that's what it does. I don't think it dramatically increases density. I also think that a lot of the issues will be revisited and put back to the Planning Commission to talk about, hopefully, not only the enclosed porch issue, but the height of the businesses along Haverford Avenue, and a number of other issues. But we need the Planning Commission to focus on a comprehensive plan, parking, and a number of other things, and this has to move forward. And so I just think that that's the one thing I am going to say is when you started, Bob, your comment about how the form-based code was, the principles, the guiding principles, in respecting the character of Narberth, I think changing the mixed use of that church is directly the opposite of that. And that's the only thing that you can't go back and fix. Once we pass this, that's the one thing that doesn't get fixed. All these other things we can fix, that's going to be a permanent change. Whether it's a good change or not, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
You won't have a building there.
I don't know that
It's not a problem because the building will be gone. The only thing that can be built there is residential.
But the issue, Bob, was that ship sailed when somebody thought that they had some sort of reason to pay extra for the place so that they could develop it. It's not like there was another option on the table, and it was years ago at this point. At this point, everybody here seems to think that we should pass the form-based code because we have, in addition to the church, plenty of other problems. So for whatever reason, the decision was made to push this forward as one big bill. So now we can't pull out the church and deal with it separately or anything else. So if we're passing it, I'm saying then let's do it in good faith. If we're saying we do respect people's differences of opinion, whether there's a lot of them or a little of them, then we should actually act on that and make sure that we include people with differences of opinion on the Planning Commission years ago. Part of the reason for including people with differences of opinion is that you don't have a blind spot then. You rely on other people to bring things in you're not going to think about. You have to assume you're never going to know everything. So you have to operate all of our all of our commissions and all of our boards with people who don't just agree with you.
that's basically where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Solicitor, would you like to comment about combining lots?
Sure. I mean, if the question is whether there should be provision in the zoning code, this form-based zoning code about combining lots, I would say no. That isn't something that's usually handled within the zoning code. The subdivision land development ordinance, or SALO, covers subdivisions, which also is a combination or a reverse subdivision. There are plans that are set up. You submit a plan, and if you want to combine two lots, that plan will need to be approved by council. The issue of whether the lots can be combined, if that's what's proposed, is a different issue than what can be built then on that combined lot. Now, obviously, you could present a plan combining both, but it would be up to council to formally give plan approval, whether it be a simple lot line subdivision application or a larger application. Council would not have many options to not grant certain subdivision plans if everything is in accordance with the municipality's planning code of Pennsylvania. If you did not vote for that plan and they wanted to appeal our decision, they could, and if we don't have a basis, they would probably win. But it's not a blank slate. There is a process. And it will be something that, again, if someone wants to combine lots, that's going to come back before this council. Council can hear feedback from everybody again. And subdividing of lots is a separate issue from what will be built on that lot. And surely council will have the option and more control over what is built on that lot. But again, there are construction projects that are called by right, who have a right based upon what you're presenting to build under the code. And if that lot is combined, your by right rights increase because you do have a larger acreage at that time, or a larger lot.
Thank you, Mr. Solicitor.
Reference comment?
Go right ahead.
Specific to the property combining question, just to get this out there for folks with a copy at home, if you look on page 18 of the code, it lists some restrictions on lot coverage by district, and for 3A, 3B, 3C, and 4A, so everything other than the more dense districts of 4B, 5A, and 5B, there's a very strong economic disincentive to property combining, very strong, because you can cover the first, depending on the district, 30, 55, 40, or 50% of the first X square feet of the lot. But then once you go beyond that amount, it drops into the single digits. So if you were to put two lots together, you could almost not use the second one, right, for covering it with building. So except for the more dense high end of the scale, I'd encourage everyone to check that out because there's actually a pretty strong disincentive to property combination built into the code. The other thing is you look into the issue more, because I did follow up on David Schoenhardt's question about this. There's generally more concern on the part of boroughs about subdivision and property combining when you're worrying about amount of development density, et cetera. And as the solicitor pointed out, that's really governed by a separate issues outside of the zoning code.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, would you like to say anything?
No comment this time, thank you.
Thank you. Originally, when I was sitting at the council table, maybe with only a few months since being elected, and next to Nancy Lotz, the form-based code was introduced as something for the Planning Commission to study, I was very skeptical. I have an inherent skepticism against things that are stylish, against things that are the way we're doing it now. One of the reasons I love Narberth was what it had at the time seemed to me a timeless appeal. I was worried about things that committees do when they're just looking for things to do. And I was definitely worried about unintended consequences. I think I said something like, we don't want to blow up this town. What I've learned in the past 5 years is not only the wealth of intelligent resources that we have on our planning commission and through the county and here on council, people who are really thoughtful, who may have an opinion but are still listening to their neighbors at the same time, and how lucky we are to have that. But also that a complex legal document like Chapter 124, it can be very frustrating because you just want to get an answer. And you have to refer through 17 paragraphs and back and forth on different pages to get that answer. And the reason is because the municipality's planning code and the laws of the state of Pennsylvania, in many ways, try to prevent a borough like ours from doing what we want to do wholesale. And so we have to create rules that operate within a larger legal framework, so that instead of something that says you will not build this kind of thing, we have a document that's more like a westerly wind, just kind of blowing developers against the forces of nature, so that it will be more likely they will do something we want them to do, and less likely they'll do something we don't. But it doesn't mean that they are prohibited, because we cannot prohibit them. And it's the kind of thing that makes some people crazy. And I know that it bothers me. But this is the fish tank we're swimming in. I know there's some skepticism in the audience and in this community about whether council will be making changes to this document, whether it is just lip service, whether we really believe every single word in here, and if we didn't, why would we vote yes? I think what speaks most to that point, that all of these council members see this as a living document and a work in progress, is that immediately following the vote on this ordinance, and before we all get to go home, well, you can go home, well, we can, we will be voting on an amendment to the 4 bases of the code. And I expect it to be one of many. My hope is, and I will be voting in support of this code, that in 50 years' time, when I leave my home, a nice young couple will come in and they will be so excited about the timelessness that this community has preserved and the livability and the really kind of classic way of living that you really only find in cities that are extremely old. They will be so excited by it, they will ignore my choice of decor. And they will pay top dollar. And then I will sail into the west. So with that, Mr. Metrick, will you call the roll for a vote?
Yes. Thank you. Ms. Fortner?
Aye.
Ms. Richmond?
Aye.
Mr. Cilio?
Aye.
Mr. Weisbord? Mr. Wegbright?
Yes.
Ms. Teplin Moffett?
Aye.
President Mutrick?
Aye. And with that, the form-based code is passed. It goes to the mayor's desk. Because we are expecting that this floodplain ordinance will move very quickly. Mr. Solicitor, would you like to speak?
At this time, we are going to adjourn from the public meeting and the public hearing to address floodplain ordinance 996. At this time, I have a number of exhibits to introduce regarding this ordinance. The first exhibit is Board Exhibit 1, which is delivery of this ordinance and the notice of tonight's hearing in the mainline Times, dated March 29, 2016. Board Exhibit 2 is proof of publication in the mainline Times for tonight's hearing, which appeared on April 3rd and April 10th, 2016. Board Exhibit 3 is the letter presenting the ordinance to the Borough Planning Planning Commission on March 28, 2016. Board Exhibit 4 is presenting the ordinance to the County Planning Commission for review on March 28, 2016. Board Exhibit 5 is a copy of the attested ordinance to the Montgomery County Law Library that was marked received on April 1st, 2016. Board Exhibit 6 is the ordinance itself. Board Exhibit 7 is the legal notice. Board Exhibit 8 is the proof of posting of the comprehensive rezoning, which was done on April 18, 2015. Mr. Metrick, do you attest and swear that that posting did occur on April 18, 2015 as indicated?
Yes, I do.
Board Exhibit 9 is the Montgomery County Planning Commission review letter and the approval that, in their opinion, this ordinance complies with the requirements for FEMA Regional 3 flood-based floodplain management. And at that time, that's all the exhibits I have. I'd like to make some comments, just so we're all on the same page regarding this ordinance. Someone in the previous hearing made a comment about how form-based code took control out of local hands. This ordinance and the history of this ordinance certainly was an ordinance that took control out of the hands of Narberth Borough, and it's something that FEMA has been doing and continues to do for all municipalities across Pennsylvania. They finished with Montgomery County, now they've moved on to Chester County. And I think it's important for the public to understand that Borough Council did not draft this map. We did not delineate where the floodplains were. That was FEMA, and the FEMA maps were previously in place from 1996, and at that time, Council was forced to pass an ordinance adopting the FEMA floodplain as an overlay district, which is what this ordinance does as well. Again, we don't control where that is. I think it's important for the public to understand the consequences if the borough does not adopt this ordinance, and this is handed down through the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development. Hands are tied through FEMA, that if this ordinance is not passed, no resident in the borough will be able to purchase a flood insurance policy. The existing flood insurance policies for everyone in the borough will not be renewed. No federal grants or loans for development may be made in identified flood hazard areas under programs administered by federal agencies. No federal disaster assistance may be provided to repair insurable buildings located in identifiable flood hazard areas for damage caused by a flood. No federal mortgage insurance or loan guarantees may be provided in identified flood hazard areas. And federally insured regulated lending institutions, such as banks and credit unions, would have to notify applicants seeking loans for those insurable buildings in the flood areas that there is a flood hazard on that property and it's not eligible for federal disaster relief. So again, that would apply for many houses, all houses within the borough, and some directed to those within the floodplain. So this really is FEMA holding the local municipalities hostage. And it's something, I believe this is the 7th or 8th floodplain ordinance that I've done for different municipalities in Montgomery County. Now we're moving to Chester County to do the same thing. It's a highly technical ordinance. I believe it's been reviewed by our engineers. However, it's dictated through the county planning commissions. They have their marching orders, and we sought approval of our ordinance through them to make sure it complies. They've told us that it does comply. We do need to provide it to FEMA after it passes, if it does pass. But essentially, it does change the floodplain slightly. There were maps at the door. I took one for myself just to make sure that compares 1996 to 2016. Some were taken out of the floodplain, some were put in. Again, that is not our decision as Borough Council to decide who is in the floodplain. If someone wants to challenge that, they're welcome to do so, but they need to challenge that with FEMA. And we're welcome to make those changes at that time.
Thank you.
So at that time, I would open up to public comment.
All right, anybody who would like to come up and speak to discuss the floodplain ordinance? I have Linda Carter, is she here? Okay. Wonder Woman in her invisible airplane, check. Vicki Benedict Farmer again.
Back again.
We're getting closer to the end of the meeting when we can discuss what you actually asked about.
Vicki Benedict Farber, 515 Conway Avenue. And again, I've been a resident for 31 years. My house is at the end of Conway and it's part of a twin. And behind my twin is a single-family house. And these three properties were built in 1977. And the spring runs right under, from Montgomery Avenue, runs right under my property, down Conway, then comes up through Narberth Park, and then goes under the ball field.
Sometimes.
And when the houses were first built, they had water problems. And whoever was on the borough council that allowed the developers to build these houses never put in drainage for our three houses. So all the water from these three houses has to funnel down under my fence into the adjacent apartment complex. So 2 buildings from the apartments, 3 houses, all drain into this little fakakta drain for 5 properties, 2 of them commercial. And over the 31 years I've lived here, I've tried to get borough council to help me to figure out what can we do to help the drainage problems that we have, because I get the brunt of it. And I've done everything in my power to shore up my house, short of putting a moat and alligators around my house. So I just wanted to know, is there anything that we can do?
Well, in this instance, I would defer to Councilor Wainwright, who's served on Public Works for many years and is aware of many of the stormwater management intersections in the borough.
Well, for the purpose of the hearing, I mean, I don't know if I should respond, but for the purpose of answering you is, I'm going to ask Sean to look at it and see if there's anything we can do. We have we're working on a grant right now with stormwater runoff issues down in Windsor. This is a bigger issue you're bringing up, and I have to say I've been on council, and Bob knows how many years when I do, but for many years I haven't heard about this problem. So I appreciate you bringing it up. I feel bad that you had this issue.
Well, I was written up in the mainline Times, and here's a copy of it.
Thank you. So I think Bob has spoken very well to this point, which is we were not aware. That is, the people currently sitting at this table were not aware, so I appreciate you coming down. And I ask also if you could stay afterwards and we could follow up on that as well.
For a quick comment.
Go ahead.
And those properties that have those issues, the way the status of the law right now is if they needed to seek land development, they would have to correct that issue. They can't just say, hey, it's bad, we're going to leave it bad, I'm going to build around it. So if any of those properties, again, are developed in a manner where they'd have to come before council to seek land development, they are required under the law to comply with new stormwater management requirements. So that would actually improve that situation.
Thank you. Mary Ann Simpson? We asked about her earlier. Okay. I don't have any letters on the table regarding the floodplain ordinance, so that will conclude public comment.
I have questions on that.
Yeah, but now let me get to council comment. Would you like to make a motion to introduce it, and then we'll get on the table?
Just for the record, there is no more public comment on this ordinance at this time, so we will adjourn back into the public meeting where this ordinance is before this council for review and potential vote.
Okay.
Council members, I move that we adopt ordinance number 996, an ordinance amending the Narberth Floodplain Conservation District and Narberth Borough zoning ordinance to require all persons, partnerships, businesses, and corporations to obtain a permit for any construction or development, providing for the issuance of such permits, setting forth certain minimum requirements for new construction and development within areas of the borough which are subject to flooding, and establishing penalties for any person who fails or refuses to comply with the requirements or provisions of this ordinance.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, now if you could give $1 to the court reporter.
You can look. I know.
Okay, council members can discuss. Councilor Wakeberg has a question.
Real quick question to the solicitor. It was referred that it's going to be amending the form-based code ordinance. Is that official yet? I mean, doesn't the mayor have to sign off on that?
I don't, that's a technicality.
Yeah.
It will be amending the whatever code, zoning code that we had at that time. Ideally, it's the same chapter. I believe when this was presented to the county review, again, we weren't sure of the status of the form-based code, but we didn't want to be put in a situation that if it had passed, since this wasn't in the form-based code, that it would then be overruled by the passage of the form-based code. So that was sort of done out of caution. But again, it will directly impact 124, which is whatever that zoning code will be.
Anyone else?
I just want to clarify the legislative history here. We had a floodplain ordinance previously.
That's correct.
That amended our prior code, also strong-armed by, federal regulation. And I think what happened was as we went through and as we had third-party review of the form-based code, we noticed that, I think it might be the planning commission that noticed that this prior amendment didn't make it into the form-based code. So rather than going back and amending and relisting the whole form-based code, we just said, whenever that was, a couple months ago, we'll just bring this up separately as an amendment and keep it on a parallel track. That's right?
Yeah, that's accurate. There's also the need that this floodplain needed to be approved.
That also,
by different agencies.
Any other comment? Given that we're hearing a formal ordinance, Mr. Mitchell, could you call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Fortner?
Aye.
Ms. Richmond?
Aye.
Mr. Cilio?
Aye.
Mr. Weisbord?
Aye.
Mr. Wegbright?
Aye.
Ms. Devlin Moffett?
Aye.
President Mutrick?
Aye. All right. This amendment passes and goes to the mayor's desk. Thank you. I'll take a motion for adjournment.
I so move.
Is there a second? Second. Meeting is adjourned. Or actually, all in favor? Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Gotta have this.
Scan that and share it.